Welcome to A Poem in Your Pocket, part of our Way with Words series for National Poetry Month here on Mind Inclined. Now, since you're here, I suspect you already are a little intrigued by the idea of memorizing poetry, so I don't have to make a big case for it, but let me say a few words. Now, as an English professor, I probably care more about poetry than most people. And for me, having a stock of poetry is like having a large vocabulary. I can call on it to express myself and to have a better understanding of the world around me. And that's where you come in. Even if you are not a literature professor, I think you will find that knowing about poetry, memorizing a few poems, can help provide you with a little more insight in the world around us. After all, poets are part of creating the wisdom of the ages. Besides, poetry can be beautiful, fun, comical, and who couldn't use a little bit more beauty and fun and humor in their world? Are you convinced? Are you ready to start memorizing some poetry? Jupiter and I are here in Washington, D.C. to film a moving experience about the National Mall. And since we're here, I thought for this little lesson on memorizing poetry, we would film it here in a garden behind the Smithsonian Castle. It's one of the most beautiful spots in Washington, D.C. And I thought that I would choose a poem that had something to do with flowers, and I chose one by Emily Dickinson. I actually just memorized it this morning, so that tells you how easy it is to memorize poetry when you've got a few tips to do it. As if some little Arctic flower upon the polar helm went wandering down the latitudes until it puzzled came to continents of summer, to firmaments of sun, to strange bright crowds of flowers and birds of foreign tongue. I say as if this little flower to Eden wandered in. What then? Why nothing, only your inference therefrom. Isn't that a delightful poem? I enjoy it for a number of reasons. The most important one is that it gives us a sense of Dickinson's playfulness. She sets it up with a scenario that arouses our suspense, takes us through several lines, and at the end, she gives us a little surprise, but turning it back on us, because it's really about what we infer from this notion of an Arctic flower coming south. So, how do you memorize a poem like this one? Let me offer a few tips. It's actually easier than you might think, if you start with one that is fairly manageable. So this poem is only about 12 lines. You want to do something that is probably 10 to 12 lines. At any rate, choose something that is short and manageable, and also choose one that has rhyme and rhythm in it if possible. Why rhyme and rhythm? Well, I've memorized a lot of poems. Several years ago, I set a goal that I would memorize 100 poems, and I achieved my goal. Along the way, I learned, though, that rhyme and rhythm are really helpful in memorizing poetry. They give your brain something to latch onto, patterns of sound. You probably already know what rhyme is. That refers to the phenomenon of similar sounds at the ends of words. We often tend to think of exact rhyme, where the sounds are identical. In the poem that we're looking at today, Emily Dickinson's poem, she likes to use a lot of slant rhyme. So technically, the sounds are not identical, but they're similar enough that they will work in your brain. Rhythm is a little bit trickier. It refers to the pattern of unstressed and stressed syllables in a line of poetry. Let's take an example from one of her lines of poetry. She wrote in iambic meter, which simply means that you alternate unstressed and stressed syllables. Upon the polar hem. Now it's time to start memorizing. The first part is simple. Do pieces at a time. So read the entire poem twice aloud, because having heard it will help you to remember it. Read it aloud twice, and then memorize just 1 or 2 lines at a time. And don't move on until you've mastered those 1 or 2 lines. When you've got 1 or 2 done, get up to the point where you can do a whole stanza. As you go, you probably will notice some lines give you trouble for one reason or another. And at this point, it's helpful to have some mnemonic devices or other ways you can recognize patterns, and then you can memorize the patterns. For example, in this poem, several lines start with the word to continents of summer, to firmaments of sun, to strange, bright crowds of flowers. Look for other patterns as well. One that I use a lot, and I know it sounds a little silly, but I use it a lot, is alphabetical order. If I have trouble remembering which word comes first, if I notice that they come in alphabetical order, it helps. And in this case, I wouldn't necessarily have trouble knowing that bright comes before crowds, but it did help me remember that those two words came together. B, C, alphabetical order. And then finally, I'll recognize one that I had trouble with in this poem. I caught myself at one point saying came instead of went. And I recognized that went wandering down the latitudes. I had two W's in a row, so that alliteration helped me to remember that particular part of the poem. Those mnemonic devices can really help when you're trying to master a particularly thorny part of the poem. One more trick I recommend. It's really simple but really powerful. Here it is. When you notice that you have trouble with a particular line or a series of lines, focus on those and repeat them over and over, 5, 10 times in a row. It won't take long. Each one's just going to take you a second or two, but if you do them again and again, you're locking those patterns of words into your mind. This one is amazingly powerful. It's especially useful when you're working on some lines that are difficult. That happened to me in this poem. So when I had that difficult series of words together, strange, bright crowd of flowers, I noticed that it was hard for me to remember what was coming next because I was fixated on that line. So I would keep practicing that line and the line that came after it again and again until I could master it. Finally, rehearse the entire poem day after day until you've mastered it and can do it practically in your sleep. You will get to this point, but it'll take a little while. I recommend you repeat it day after day, rehearse it day after day, at least once a day for 5 days in a row. And then after that, you may need to do it only twice a week for a month or so, and then after that, maybe only once a month. What I do to memorize all of my poems, of course I've got a lot of them to memorize, is that I go through them 5 poems a day, Monday through Saturday, without fail. Find times when you can rehearse your poetry every day. I like to do it while I'm walking, or even better, while I'm swimming, because swimming can be really boring and it helps to pass the time. That's it. You have all you need to start memorizing poetry. I hope you'll give it a try, and I encourage you to post a comment and let me know how it's going.